Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles, trying to bring viewpoint diversity, different perspectives, and a little bit of unity to the very toxic world of social media. And my guest today is excellent at doing that. And I'm really excited to have him on here after we've kind of been doing our own thing and then our paths have crossed a little bit. Um, he is a writer, musician, photographer, and designer, and also the co-host of the Fair Perspectives podcast, which is a wonderful podcast. It brings on really awesome people, and I was very fortunate to be a guest on that. Very cool through the organization of Fair. It's Angel Eduardo. I'm really glad to be able to have this conversation with you, man, because we interact a little bit, but to be able to just sit down and just talk to you one on one, I'm excited about it. And I was going to do it just privately, then I was like, oh, let's just do this on the podcast. I think I want to know some stuff about you, about how you landed where you are and your approach to things, which I just really admire, and it's an inspiration to me. So, kind of like, how did you get there? So, can you just introduce yourselves a little bit to my audience, which is a mix, but it has a lot of educators, teachers, and stuff like that. About like, what's your background to get you to be such a kind of, I guess, heterodox,
Yeah.
logical, but soft-hearted person in the way you interact. It's really awesome. I really
Mm.
admire your approach, Angel. I really do.
Oh, well, thank you very much, man. It's awesome to have a partner in crime in that. I feel the same way about you. And I forget how I came across you, but I've been a fan ever since. And I think, you're modeling it in this wonderful way that I try to do the same thing. So it's just great to find somebody else engaged in the same project, because you
Yeah,
hear all the time about, especially on social media, that it's a cesspool and nothing good can come of it. But here we are. So
yeah.
yeah, I should ask, are there any language restrictions
No,
on the
no,
podcast? Okay, cool.
nope.
So
All good.
I don't have, I could switch that off and just not worry about it.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you said, yeah, I'm a writer, musician. I do a bunch of different kinds of art. And my day job is I'm the director of messaging and editorial for FAIR, the Foundation
Okay.
Against Intolerance and Racism. Fairforall.org. If you haven't checked us out yet, you should, especially educators. We have Fair in Education. We have our initiative, and we're working on, you know, alternative. I guess alternative is the wrong word, but different approaches to curricula that can solve some of the issues that we're having, some of the tensions that we're having
Mhm.
in that field. But as for me, what can I say? I'm a fuck up, dude. Like that's what it really is.
You're an
That
artist though, like, so you're a
yeah.
creative-minded person. You're part of that like chaos, the order chaos, Jordan Peterson thing. You're in the chaos,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So it's that's what I mean though, is that I think the reason I'm an artist is because of the constant sort of self-discovery. And we were just talking about Brazilian jiu-jitsu before we recorded, like the ego death of
yeah.
art. Like there's always somebody who can sing better. There's always somebody who could play guitar better.
Mm.
There's always something that's going to go, like I just imagine what it must have been like for people in London when they went to some random club and Jimi Hendrix was on stage. You know
Yeah,
what I
there's
mean?
like a famous story about that, right? Where Eric Clapton was like curled up crying or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's another story of, Sergeant Pepper came out, the Beatles album came out on the Friday or something, and then the Saturday night, Paul McCartney and a few other people went to see Jimi Hendrix play. He opened with the song Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Like he learned it and was playing it on stage with his band. And like just in his face, like, yo, I'm better than you. You know what I mean? I don't think he did. I don't think he had that attitude, but it's just this amazing thing about art that connects so much with humanity in that way, that there's always something beautiful and inspiring and mind-boggling. The first time you see this crazy movie, or the first time you read this book or hear this song, and it just changes your life and changes your life trajectory. I love that. I fell in love with that. And I've always also just had a desire to both express myself and also to communicate with people. Art was a beautiful way to do that. I always found it really hard to be understood,
Yeah.
and I always found it really hard to understand. And art made it so much easier. So hearing a song and connecting with somebody over a song, it's like, okay, we have that, and then not knowing how to process my feelings going through things growing up, and all that stuff. art was there as a way for me to process it, and like kind of self-therapy sort of thing. Like, oh, I'm stream of consciousness sort of writing these lyrics, and I don't really know what the song is about until I'm done. And then I'm reading it through and I'm like, oh wow. You have these kind of moments where you're like,
Mm.
oh, I didn't even know that I felt like this,
Go,
So stuff like that.
yeah, going back to the Jimi Hendrix kind of metaphor, do you think it's a humility thing too? Because when I think of like artists, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them have big egos, but it's like a paper or whatever, a
Yeah.
house of cards almost. Like
Right.
it's all kind of smoke
Yeah.
and mirrors because they are very fragile. That's why they take criticism so hard. But there is that
Mm-hmm.
humility part of it, which I try to have. Like intellectual humility is a big thing for me
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
in viewpoint diversity, it feels like there's something that I might be missing here. And
Right.
do you do that like where
Yes.
you're humble in your art, but then you do that in intellectual space too?
Yeah. So I think it's an extension of that. I think the
Yeah.
knowledge that, growing up, my cousin is also a guitar player, and he's the best guitar player I've ever seen, like, of any kind. And so I'm like, I live with this dude. I play in a band with this dude. So I have no choice but to be humble every second. Like I can't play like that, you know? And not only was it a kind of a humbling experience like that, but it was also a way for me to go, okay, well, there's kind of no point in me trying to beat him. So what can I do to be complimentary? And so it taught me to kind of seek out what my strengths are and to make other people's strengths my strength. And so I realized I don't have to own everything. I don't have to carry it all myself. I can outsource talent, and I can outsource intellect, and I can outsource
Yeah.
perspectives, and just kind of, all right, well, what did you find? Let me see what you found, and I'll put it in my kind of library, and the one thing that art did for me as well, which connects to this intellectual space, is that you screw up on stage, you have to just like figure it out, and you have to just learn from that, right? You can't
Yeah.
stop, you can't do it
Yeah.
over, the moment already passed, right? You just have to figure it out. And so I've gotten used to being public about my flaws, and being public about my inability to understand something or inability to do something, and then being public about my ability to improve on those things. And so in the intellectual space, it's really like, I don't need to understand everything automatically. I just need to want to understand everything. And when I meet somebody whose opinions and point of view, I like, I talk about this all the time. I say, I'll see somebody on Twitter and I'm like, they seem smart, but everything they're saying seems completely insane to me. Like, I don't
Mm.
understand how
Right.
anybody could come to that conclusion or make this argument. Follow. Like that's the impetus for me. I go, let me figure out what's going on. I need to understand how this person's brain works, because it's so foreign. So rather than it being a kind of thing that you instinctively reject, I've kind of trained myself to lean into it, if
So
that makes sense.
it makes sense to me. Like
Yeah.
that's the way I am. I think that's the way I am actually naturally too, is just like,
Yeah.
wow, I don't get that at all. It's that I love that Abraham Lincoln quote, I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like,
like
that
that
is
too.
so good. Like,
Yeah.
but how like are you built like this, or is this something that you developed through a process? Because I think it's the
Hmm.
best. I mean, I don't know. I think it's the best approach with these intellectual spaces, but like
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to do it. I try to model it for my
Hmm.
students and for people on social media and stuff like that, but I'm
Yeah.
just naturally built that way. Are
Yeah.
you? Are you naturally that way?
Um,
Or did you have to develop it?
I don't think I'm naturally like it. I
Mm.
think I think maybe now I am. Like maybe
Yeah.
now it's so ingrained after many, many years. And that's what I meant about being a fuck up,
Yeah.
is that like every time that I get kind of full of myself and overconfident, reality hits me right in the face,
Yeah. Yeah.
and shows me how stupid I have been, So like I say this a lot too, that I've been wrong a lot, right? And every time that I have said to myself, like in an interpersonal sort of thing, like, you know what, fuck this guy. I'm gonna tell him off. I'm gonna tell him, to stop pushing me around, or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm gonna go off on this person. I'm gonna lose my temper because it's justified, because they've done something or said something. I have always been wrong about that. Like, I misunderstood something, I misinterpreted something, you know, I misheard, or like something they said that was totally innocuous just touched an insecurity of mine or something, and I blew up, and then I felt immense guilt over
Yeah.
doing that and making somebody feel bad for no good reason. And so eventually that turned into a reflex of like, okay, what am I not getting? What are all the other possible ways I could be misunderstanding or misinterpreting this? What are all the other ways that I can read this? What are all the other possibilities? And that can be kind of crippling, where you just don't even know what to do. But for me, it forces me to pause and go, don't do that thing
Yeah.
where you're going to feel awful like for the rest of your life. Cause I'm one of those. Like, I think about stuff that I said in third grade to somebody and I feel guilty about it right now. So
I do
I
too.
don't want to stock up on any more of those. I've got plenty, you know. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. It's I've been trained. Like, I'm a smart guy, and you know, I enjoy learning stuff, and there's always a risk for me of kind of becoming too confident and becoming too sure of myself, and that I know everything, and I start speaking that way, and then I get hit with that reality stick, and then I
Yeah.
feel terrible. So I'm like, okay, keep training yourself to be humble, recognize you don't know everything, and question even your questions, and just, you know,
Yeah.
curl yourself into a ball. Kind of.
I love that process though. I really do. Like when I say like I like being
Yeah.
proven wrong, I really like there's when someone's like, well, yeah, but there's this blind spot that you have of this. I go, whoa, that is all like I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you have a blind
Me
spot
too.
here because of this and that. Like, because
Me too.
I think back to Sam Harris had a great quote where he's something along the lines of like, why would I want to hold on to bad ideas? Like
Hmm.
if I'm wrong or something, I have a blind spot. Why would I? People just guard that so tightly, and they
Hmm.
don't want to look over here. You know, like there's that Candace Owens documentary came out.
Oh
You know, it
man.
was whatever. But like I watched it, and then I was
Didn't know
like,
about that.
the BLM one. I
Oh
don't know.
man. No, I didn't
It's
know. I
it's
didn't.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
She's out of
But
my orbit.
that's probably a wise. Um, I made some criticisms of her on my Instagram. People came after me, but anyway. So, but I think that there are points in it that are valid, mixed in with other things, and I think that what
Right.
happens is people just go, I don't want to look at that. Or when people talk about, you know, there's anything that's like a really controversial thing, you pick any
Hmm.
controversial topic,
Hmm.
you go, well, here's a perspective that you might not have seen before. People just go, no. Where
Right.
I just think that why not just have a more robust understanding of this
Yeah.
stuff? But people don't seem to think like that.
I think it's I think it's the mistake that a lot of us make. I make it, you make it. It happens because it's a human thing, I think, which is that your ideas are more than just your ideas. Your ideas are you. And when
Yeah,
that's the case, and someone's challenging your idea, they're not just challenging your idea, they're challenging your conception of self, like who you
yes,
actually are. And then you have to defend that. It's, you know, someone's throwing a knife in your chest, you have to block it. You have to kind of figure out that thing. But it's not actually true that you are your ideas, right? And we know this on some subconscious level, because if we can just think back to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something that we thought that we no longer think.
yeah,
And well, which one of you is it? Right? It's obviously who you are now, but were you not you before? Of course you were. You were a version of you who
yeah,
believed something else. And
yeah.
it's kind of like your ideas are kind of like clothes, like
I like that.
some of them fit you really well. Some of them, people when they think of you, they see you in a certain outfit because it's so, connected to how they see you and stuff like that. So it can be that attached, and you have your favorite ones that make you feel good and all that sort of stuff. But there are also ones that you don't wear anymore because it's embarrassing. Like, I can't believe I even dressed like that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you grow out of stuff, literally, like they just don't fit you anymore.
Mhm.
And you just decide, you know what? I'm changing my style. I'm not going to wear that anymore. And
Yeah.
but if you look at a photograph of yourself wearing that stuff, you're not going, that's not me. You're just going, how embarrassing that I'm wearing that. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. But if you actively try to make your self-conception be based on the the flux itself,
Yeah.
which is what I try to do. I try to make it my brand, quote unquote, that I'm just trying my best, that I'm going to screw up, that I don't know everything, and that I'm eager to learn. right? Like that's my brand. That's what I want people to see me as, so that they can kind of help me reinforce that behavior for myself. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's such a weight off your shoulders too. When you say like,
Dude.
I am gonna get a lot of stuff wrong
Yep.
and I am interested in being wrong, it's just like, oh, I don't have to keep up this facade that I have all
Yeah.
the answers.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier.
For
Like once I
sure.
adopted that, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
whew, like
There
the
there's
pressure's
there's
off.
there's yeah, there's two things. There's not lying, which is
Mhm.
another Sam Harris thing that I picked up. Like I literally just don't lie anymore at all.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're used to doing it, there's gonna be a little bit of whiplash and it's gonna be a little rough in the beginning. But once you get off that initial bumpiness, everything is so much smoother because you don't have to worry about anything, right? Like
Yeah. Well,
there's
lives
another,
stack up. Lives stack up because you
yeah,
got to keep a
exactly.
track of all of like, oh, this.
Right.
It's just, yeah.
There's another Lincoln quote. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's him. He says, "No one has a good enough memory to be a successful liar."
I love that.
You know? And I'm like, "Oh, good. I'm not wasting that brain space. Like
Right.
I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think right now. And if it conflicts with something I said before, I'll just say, "Oh, well, this is what I think now." Like I'm not sure what the context was or whatever. I don't remember. If I don't, or I change my mind or whatever, right? So those two things, stop lying. And the second thing is, put yourself out there as a flawed human being, and so much just gets removed. This idea
Yeah.
of, the bravado of like I'm right about everything, that's an impossible thing to hold on to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, like my identity or my ego isn't connected with having the right answers. It's connected to getting to the right answers.
Yeah.
And that's just like so much better. And you can hold me accountable to that.
Right.
So in this podcast, I've done 120 episodes or something like that.
Oh, nice.
It's all about like just viewpoint diversity. So I brought on different people from different angles. And I think the
Hmm.
biggest takeaway that I've gotten is in alignment with what we were just saying, which is the concept of identity. So I've had, I think, 8 different transgender people on. So it's like blue-haired transgender activists from like the extreme left who, take down the capitalists and stuff like that, to like MAGA hat wearing,
Uh-huh.
trans people who are like there on January 6th. Like it's been
What?
interesting. Yeah, they exist.
No, those guys don't exist. I have it on good authority. Those people do not exist.
It's wild, man. And then so what I
Wow.
found is so how you identify like as yourself. So if you identify, so I had like Danny Senya, Lex Horowitz on who identify as like trans, as activists. That's like high on how they see themselves. But then I
Hmm.
had like Corinna Cohn on or Luca Eichludine, who was on January 6th, who see themselves as like a computer programmer or a gun enthusiast or whatever it is. So when
Hmm.
you go after like the traditional narratives about like trans, like the more controversial trans elements, they're just like, oh, that's lower on the thing. Like if you
Mm.
see your race, your LGBTQ status, whatever it is, as like high in how you see yourself, then you are
Hmm.
going to defend that. For me, it's not about race or anything like that. Just, I mean, I'm, kind of run of the mill white guy, but like it's like educator, open-minded, and like dedicated father. So you challenge those things. When people say like you're actually not open-minded, I get very defensive. When you say
Mm.
like you're a bad father, a negligent father or something like that, I get very defensive. You're a bad teacher. I get
Mm.
very defensive, way more so than if you attack my, whatever height or whatever it is that I identify as. It's a very interesting thing when
Yeah.
you look at
Yeah.
how people identify, and then those are the things that they align with when you say like their ideas are themselves, and how they get way more defensive or almost like go on the attack mode when those
Hmm.
things are shot at.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's been
Hmm.
really interesting seeing that.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that align with you? Like, do you like if you think about like the way you identify to
Uh-huh.
as yourself, like do you like the things that maybe it's like more so as a musician than it might be, I don't know, maybe more so than like your race or something along those lines. So
Hmm.
if someone um attacks your musical ability, then you take that as more of like a dart. You know?
Yeah. I would say maybe like let's say 15 years ago, 100%. Like if
Yeah.
someone was like, you sing out of tune and you suck, that would have been like crippling for me because
Yeah.
so much of the identity I was trying to build for myself, right? I was basically grasping at anything that I could. Where it's like, all right, so I have some ability here. This is going to be who I am. And I have some ability here. This is going to be who I am. And then it would slowly just get chipped away at because of the humility thing that we were
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, I can't live here because it's too like unstable, So I
Yeah.
would be forced to figure something else out. And those immutable characteristic type things, being Hispanic, uh, being brown, quote unquote, like none of those things worked for me because I couldn't successfully assimilate into them in the first place. Like there are things that you're quote unquote supposed to like or supposed to do as a member of X group that I didn't do or like. And it's like I'm listening to Led Zeppelin and they're listening to hip hop music, and that's like a fundamental divide there. Like we laugh at different things, we talk differently. So those things didn't work for me. So I had to basically give up on them really early on.
Mm. Yeah.
Like by the time I was in high school, those things were just not even an option for me. And so throughout high school, I'm trying to find other ways to create a self-conception, right? I couldn't be a goth kid because that kind of wasn't me. I couldn't do the skater kid thing. I couldn't skateboard, so I couldn't be a jock. I wasn't good at sports. So like all the prepackaged kind of, high school cliches, I couldn't do any of
Okay.
those.
Okay.
The one that worked the best was, well, I'm the lead singer of a band and I play guitar. But that didn't quite work either because for some reason I went to high school in that exact window of time where playing guitar and being in a band didn't mean shit to anybody.
Oh man.
So like nobody cared, for the most part. It
Oh,
was not this thing where like, oh man, you're gonna get so many chicks, that kind of shit. Nothing, right? Like all through high school, nothing. Um, which was great in hindsight. It sucked obviously
yeah.
throughout, but in hindsight, it was great because I would have retreated into that and I would have just become like I would have just worn that uniform, so to speak, and I wouldn't have become myself. But I feel like all the difficulty and all the inability to kind of fit into those boxes forced me to just do the work of becoming who I am. And now, if somebody criticizes my singing or playing or how I look or whatever, like I just think, well, that's not nice, and like that's
Yeah.
it. But it doesn't
Yeah.
affect my self-conception because it took me so long to build it.
Okay.
No random asshole with a comment is going to do anything, you know.
Yeah.
Like I've done it myself already. I've beaten myself up plenty.
Yeah. Do you get that? Do you get the like hate that you're not that you're some sort of I don't even know what you're kind of racially ambiguous to be honest, Angel. Like do you get do you get that kind of hate that a lot of people get who are in the heterodox space of like you're
Yeah.
not like we're mostly on Twitter. I'm sure it's
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah, I've
that.
gotten
Yeah.
it. I've
Yeah.
gotten it for sure. Some people, I wrote a piece about it actually for Newsweek. It was called "Stop Calling Me White for Having the Wrong Opinions,"
Yeah.
and and the response to that was crazy. So like Nicole Hannah Jones was one of the people who responded, and that blew up. Uh, I know we have similar experiences with that,
She
but
blocked me.
I haven't been blocked. But yeah, she put me on blast, and I don't think she realizes how many people hate follow her because it actually had the reverse effect. More people followed me as a result of that.
Mhm.
Um, but in the comments, some people were insisting that I'm black and that I should see myself that way,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
I'm basically I'm doing the dance for the white man kind of thing. Other people insist that I'm white because of the opinions I have, right?
Yeah.
And then everything in between, like, oh no, you're mixed because my parents are from the Dominican Republic. I was born here in New York City.
Yeah.
Uh, so Dominican American makes sense, right? But I don't put much stock into that label for myself. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't really describe who I am in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I get it all the time because of my opinions or because of yeah, I guess you're right about the ambiguity because people walk up to me all the time speaking Arabic and
Yeah.
Greek
Yeah.
and Greek. I get it all the time. The other day, there's this soccer player called Salah, and
Okay.
I apparently I look like him, and it happens all the time. I'm walking around. Some dude the other day literally was like Salah, and I was like, I get it all the time. Yeah.
Start
Uh,
signing autographs.
I should.
Taking pictures of kids and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, so I get it. I get that sort of stuff all the time, and most people who don't neatly fit into a box frustrate people for a
yeah,
variety of reasons. So,
yeah, but you know what? Like one, I grew up like in a it was pretty white, but then there was like one or two black kids in my neighborhood, and then there was like a decent like Puerto
mhm.
Rican population in my high school. But when I moved out to California and started teaching in these very diverse communities and stuff, like it doesn't fit simply. Like when I first started seeing like the
Mhm.
skater crew, and there were a bunch of black kids who were skaters. I was like, black kids skate? Then yeah, there was like rock bands, and there were black kids who were playing the rock band. And I was like, what?
Mhm.
That's interesting. And then there was like, a whole like thing out here of like Hispanic kids who are in like the goth crew. And I was like, oh, what
Yeah.
is going on? I thought that this was this and that was that. A good friend
Yeah.
of mine grew up in Compton in the 90s, and he was really into like remote controlled cars and BMXing and stuff like that. And I was like, this is so strange. What's going on? It's like, oh, that's right. People are just people. And they have
Right.
all like,
Humans. Yeah. It's just
yeah.
humans. Yeah.
But I think that if you're not exposed to that, then all you go off of is what the media kind of depicts these groups
Mhm.
as. So
Yeah.
I didn't even know that that was a possibility until I was like kind of brought out here and interacted in these communities and see
Mhm.
that these communities, now it's like not unusual to see whatever, like a black kid wearing like a Nirvana shirt or something like that. But
Right.
when I moved out here when I was 22 years old or whatever, I'd have been like, that's strange. But
Yeah.
it's not. It's actually not strange. It's just strange because it doesn't seem to be projected very much out.
Yeah, it was strange to your experience,
Yeah.
right? Like to you, that's bizarre. That's an anomaly for you.
Mhm.
But then you realize, oh, your world is so small and it just expanded a little bit.
Yeah.
Then it ends up being a wonderful thing. You're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, of course. Dude, one of the coolest
Course.
bands, metal bands is called Seven Dust. Their singer is this big dude with dreadlocks and like he sounds awesome. He's one of my favorites. And you'd be like, oh, like a black guy can't sing in a metal band. Like, well, there he is, and he's fucking killing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we talked about Jimi Hendrix earlier. Like,
Right.
he's the greatest of all time still.
And I think that's good because you don't want to be pigeonholed into one, especially like dealing with my like age of like teenagers, where
Hmm.
they're so trying to figure out who they are, where's their
Yeah.
place in this world, just to like break down those barriers of just because you might look a certain way. And so your video and your writing on Superman is really, really great. I
Yeah.
really loved it. Can you just share like just like the Cliff's Notes version of
Sure.
how that developed and stuff like that? And it's on YouTube so
Mm.
people can check it out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the I guess the representation stuff or why I love
Mhm.
Superman. I guess
Um,
they're the same. But
Yeah, just like how yeah, just I guess kind of this
mhm.
not as much like why you love Superman because Superman's awesome, but
Yeah.
like the representation element of it.
Yeah, so but it starts with me just loving that character. I was a very young kid in the late 80s and Christopher Reeve Superman films were out. I had them on video. Somehow, someone put that in front of me. There were tons of cartoons and toys and things. And it hit me. I don't have a memory of not being in love with this character. It doesn't exist. My reality doesn't exist in my mind without wanting to have a cape on and run around and like ever since I was a kid. And I just resonated so much with it. Like, here's this guy, he's doing the right thing, he's helping people, he's powerful and it's fun, and there's that kind of, I'm sure, sort of, fantastical element to it. But I think the reason it really resonated is because I felt like I saw myself in this character. Like I had this urge to do what he was doing, which is to use his powers for good, and I couldn't have articulated that at the time because I was 4, but I feel like I felt that. I feel like there was something was communicated kind of subconsciously, sort of instinctively, and I connected with that. And it never left me. I always just had that inkling, like I want to do that. I want to be that guy who sees somebody who's in need and helps them out. Um, and then, it never occurred to me like, oh, I don't look like Superman, or we don't have the same color skin, or, his hair is different. Obviously, his hair is different. It's like I knew these things and it didn't really matter to me in that way. And then I don't remember exactly when, but there was some kind of murmurings of, oh, what if we made Superman black? That kind of stuff. And I just thought to myself, like, that's so insulting. Like because the implicit sort of reasoning there is that's going to make people like him more or something.
Right.
I'm like, how could I possibly like him anymore? It's impossible. And I actually would like him less that now that you've done this kind of thing that kind of sullied my relationship with him because you've made it about this thing that it was never about.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter that he looked more like you, Will, than he ever did like me, right?
Yeah.
Neither of us really look like him, but like this idea was insulting to me because it was essentializing. It was kind of saying, oh, there's something about you and something about him as a character that's fundamental that you can never bridge. There's some divide there that you can never bridge. And I never felt that gulf ever in my life until someone talked about changing him for the sake of bridging, for the
Yeah.
sake of bringing him closer to me. And it had the opposite effect. It made it feel more distant. And I rejected that. So, and the idea, obviously is you can see yourself in anybody because you're a human being. And that's the part that matters. And the wonderful things about that character are the qualities that he embodies. And all these characters, any character in fiction that you love, the reason why you resonate with them is because they're human beings and they're some version of the human condition. And you can connect with that no matter who you are, what's between your legs, what your skin looks like. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. You connect with that human thing. And so, people will say, I'll just preempt this. People will say, okay, well, if that's the case, why does it matter if we change his skin color? It matters because now you're making it about that, and it wasn't a necessary thing to do in the first place. And so if you say, well, we need more people who look like this in our media, I'll be like, yeah, great. But those characters exist in comics. Let's make movies about them
Mhm.
instead of doing the lazy kind of race swapping thing where we take something that exists and just change the color. Boom, we've done our job. Like that's lazy. And it's a disservice to those cultures and those minority groups that you are supposedly wanting to support. So I can't see any good reason for doing anything except leaving him the way that he is because that's how he is.
Yeah, there's real life, there's all these superheroes like, just throughout history that are black and Hispanic and everything like that, that we can
Right.
tell their story and we don't have to
Right.
like change it up. This is an interesting thing because forcing kids to see race when they don't. My kids are half Filipino and then half Caucasian. But like they really like they'll we watched some of Michael Jordan highlights and my kids are like, Dad, check this out. Do I look like Michael Jordan? I'm like, yeah, buddy, you do. Watch fights and they love
Right.
Israel Adesanya. So my 8-year-old really he's like, look, I'm Izzy, I'm Izzy. It's like, do I look like Izzy? I'm like, yeah, buddy, you look like Izzy.
Yeah.
Like, because they
Right.
just don't see it that way. Um, it's not that my kids don't, they're in a very racially diverse school, which is really rad. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like their friend group looks very diverse, but it's not that they don't see it. Like they're going to describe it. They'll be like, oh, he has brown skin or whatever, but they just don't attach any meaning to it. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean anything that the one kid has darker hair or lighter eyes or
Right.
whatever it is. There's no meaning to it. And I do worry that they're going to go out into a world where people say, oh, this kid with this skin color, that means this or that
Right.
means that, because
Yeah.
it takes away. There's something when my kids first got bullied, I remember it so clearly. Like they were in this loving cocoon of our home where they just felt nothing but good energy. And then I was at actually a jiu-jitsu class and my kid was getting bullied by one kid. I watched it. And my son, he was like 5 at the time or 4, and he just didn't know how to handle
Mm-hmm.
this older boy just being mean to him. And he's just like, whoa, like it was so heartbreaking. It makes me cry, like just
Yeah.
thinking about it. But
Yeah.
I worry about that loss of innocence in this racial area because my kids don't think like that. They're a weird little hodgepodge. All of my friends seem to be in these
Mm-hmm.
interracial relationships. They're all kind of some
Mm-hmm.
shade of brown, but like it feels almost like a loss of innocence. And I don't know if that's accurate, but it feels that way to me when they're going
Yeah.
to be pushed into these like racialized way of
I
thinking
agree.
about the world.
I agree. Yeah. It's a corruption of the way that they view the world. So there's a book called Racecraft. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So Barbara and Karen Fields. There's an anecdote in it that I'll get the details a little bit wrong, but basically it's, a couple of parents are talking to each other and one of their kids walks in and talks about a classmate of theirs and says that the kid is caramel, right? Or something like that, right? Like he's caramel. And then the parents kind of like laugh to each other, like, oh, isn't it so cute? Like he doesn't know yet, meaning like he doesn't understand race yet. Like that's so cute that he thinks caramel is a race, but it's not. Like that kid's probably black, like that's what they're thinking. And the weirdness of that scene is actually that the kid is right and the parents are wrong, because what the parents are not recognizing is that they what they're laughing about is that they haven't yet indoctrinated their kid into this racialist paradigm. The kid is just walking around trying to categorize things in a way that makes sense. And he's doing a better job than his parents are, because these crude racial categories are actual nonsense. You know, like you mentioned, you're like a run-of-the-mill white guy. Like, that's not true. You know, you have a very specific ancestry that is very different from, you know, Sylvester Stallone's or something. You know what I mean? But you're both lumped into this category of white, and it diminishes who you are. You know, so I think you're right about worrying about that for your kids. And I think the way forward, you know, I know you've talked to Sheena Mason. The way forward is getting rid of this completely. So we have to stop talking this way. We have to stop seeing ourselves this way and each other this way. And we have to model that, so that when you know, your kid encounters somebody who is using that kind of framework, it just seems bizarre. Like, why are you doing that weird thing? You know, it's like they might as well be like riding a unicycle or something. It's like, that's so strange. Like, why are you operating in this way? You know? And I, you know, it's a lot, because there's a lot to disentangle. But now, like, when people use that sort of stuff, I'm like, oh man, like, I'm kind of like those parents where, but you know, in the opposite direction, I'm kind of like, oh, you're still in the game of this like skin game, and I'm not. So it's similar to, you know, leaving a religion. You know, like,
Yeah.
now I see, and I'm like, yeah, well, I grew up in that, so I understand it, but I don't believe that anymore. So I'm looking at your behavior and I'm like, oh wow, it's so interesting from the outside, you know?
Yeah, Sheena Mason, she's so much more equipped than I am,
Hmm.
to argue her point, but I really love it. I also think it's the inevitable future, but there
Yeah,
are
it
people
has to be.
holding this. You know, this is Cylinder Radio, so it's all about perspective, you know, alternative perspectives.
Hmm.
What's the steel man argument against that? Because you and I align a lot on this issue.
Hmm.
Which, by the way, Angel, I have to say, like, there's a lot of people that I've had on this podcast that I've interacted with online who have treated me with a lot of respect and my ideas with a lot of respect, even when I talk about racial issues, which I was really hesitant about because I do look the way that I look. And the fact that people
Right.
take me
Right.
seriously, you know, I mean, you know, Brittany King, I think, was one of the first ones to bring me on, or that's where I met you. You know,
Yeah,
Sheena
I think
Mason, a
that
whole
was
bunch
right.
of people,
Yeah.
like they took my perspective seriously, and I almost was like, almost didn't expect it.
Hmm.
Oh, you're just this, like, you know, white cis het white man, because a lot of the
Right.
whatever woke people, that's what I get labeled, and then my ideas just don't matter.
Right.
Um, so I almost have to, like, you know, shoo them towards like someone who has saying the same thing as me. I'd be like, well, just go listen to Angel. He'll just say it through his, you know, brown
Right.
mouth or whatever. And
Right.
it's like
Yeah, but that's like, that's
I didn't
also
get that at
gross.
all from a lot of people that I've developed, and it just
Yeah.
it made me feel really good. But
Yeah.
what is the steel man
Uh-huh.
argument against this taking away the racialization, the racializing people and stuff like
Yeah.
that? Is it just like, well, then you're ignoring the plight of people's struggle? I mean, what would you say is like the best arguments against the stuff that Sheena talks about, the stuff that you promote, the
Yeah.
stuff that Fair promotes, all
Hmm.
that stuff?
Hmm. Um, it's kind of a problem, because I can steel man it, but I know that it's based on a misunderstanding. So one thing that people say is, you know, but I'm very attached to my identity as a Black person. I care very much about my history and my ancestry and my culture of being Black. I care about the, you know, being a part of that lineage that led to the civil rights movement and all those things. And so I totally get that, but the issue is that there's a misunderstanding. There's a conflation of race with all of those things. And race is none of those things. Race is not ethnicity or culture or community or ancestry. You know, it's none of those things. It pretends to be those things, and we graft it onto those things to the extent that we feel that they're inextricable. But that's actually a smokescreen. It's not true. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, you know, they'll say, well, you know, that's this colorblind thing where you're going to be like, I don't see race, and that's going to cause you to ignore racism. And that's also a misunderstanding, at least of my position and Sheena's position, and I'm sure yours as well, where we distinguish between the concept of race and the behavior and thinking that is called racism. You know, so for example, I don't believe in God, right? And and that's how I operate in the world under that paradigm. But that doesn't mean that I don't think Christians exist, or that I don't understand that religion is a thing, and that I don't understand that history has been shaped by religion, and that we exist in a world that's been shaped by that belief and people who believe it. So I can recognize all of those things without also believing it, right? So I don't have to believe in God to recognize a Christian, or to recognize Christianity as a thing that exists, and to engage with it however I'm going to engage with it. Like if people are voting a certain way or whatever, right? Behaviors that are based upon certain beliefs that I don't share. It's the same thing. I don't believe in race, but I know other people do. And I know that race, the belief in race has shaped the world that I live in. And I need to engage with it with that knowledge, but I don't have to buy into the game myself, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the best I could do. I haven't heard, those are the only real arguments that I have heard. And I understand where they're coming from, but they're based on misunderstandings.
Yeah, like I guess the question that I would have, like especially when we make that comparison between like race and religion, is like,
Mm-hmm.
how does believing in, following this idea of racializing people and things
Mm-hmm.
like, how does that make your life better? Like, how are you better off
Right.
buying into this compared
Right.
to like you, Angel, who doesn't buy into it? What makes someone
Yeah.
who's like very race focused? Why
Yeah.
is your life like quantifiably better? Because,
Mm-hmm.
just like when it comes to religion, like I've actually been going down the other direction. I was an
Yeah. I
atheist, agnostic,
saw.
and then I go, and
Yeah.
the reason is very personal. It's very
Uh-huh.
personal. It's very actually secular too, which is just like it makes my life objectively and subjectively better. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in. Like,
Right.
does someone who focuses so much on race, an Ibram Kendi type person, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you could say financially, but like, how does your life
Yeah.
better believing this? And I don't know how it would be.
Uh, the only way that I could think of
Sense of
is
belonging.
by by conflating it with those other things.
Yeah.
So thinking that it's a necessary component, or that it is itself those other things, but it isn't.
Yeah.
So that's the real mission, as far as I'm concerned, is disabusing people of the notion that their culture and their ethnicity and their ancestry and their community and their sense of connection to a larger group is contingent upon this concept of race.
Right. And you could get it through other ways. I mean, even like
You
Sam
already have
Harris.
it. Yeah,
Yes. Sam
you
Harris,
already
who's
have
like
it.
obviously a hardcore atheist, but he believes in like meditation practices and
Hmm.
gratitude and like, expressing like a lot of things that are also like in the Bible as like a
Right.
like a guidebook. Like he
Hmm.
believes in a lot of that. He doesn't like the dogma. He doesn't like, but there's like,
Right.
oh, there's some quality things in here that you can use without the faith element.
Right.
So I think
Exactly.
that if a racialized person or someone who's like very focused on race, which the comparison makes sense. I mean, McWhorter talks about that. It does make a
Hmm.
lot of sense. But if they can go, all
Yeah.
right, well, so the sense of community, the sense of belonging, blah 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 blah, does it have to be connected with race, or can I get those things from something that is
Hmm.
maybe deeper, closer to the truth than
Hmm.
this kind of literally skin level, surface level
Yeah.
thing?
Well, that's the trick. The trick is that, as Sheena says, you know, race kind of hides itself as these things. But the reality is, you already have those good things that you're worried about losing or worried about having to find elsewhere. They're already there, and race is not giving them to you. You just think they are. You think it is. So
Yeah,
really all I'm doing is like pulling the curtain back and saying, "Hey, that curtain wasn't the thing. The thing behind the curtain that you've had all along, that's the thing." So it's there's nothing to lose and there's nothing to look for, because it's already there. It's just a matter of understanding, reframing it so that you understand that you're not getting it from the place you thought you were, but you are getting it, you
yeah.
know?
The last thing I want to touch on, because you and I, where we also align, which is on a lot of things, but it's how we interact with our detractors to some degree, what we
Mhm,
try to
mhm.
promote on social media, because the things that you're saying I think are really valuable. I mean, I want people. You watch that thing that went viral with the three critical race theory teachers with me.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. But like people who are like in that camp, which are, it's a lot. Um,
Mhm.
they need to hear this and interact with it and chew on it, but they're so closed-minded. They're
Mhm.
so have their mind made up.
Yeah.
What have you done that you've found some level of success in breaking through to open up the minds of these people who are, yeah,
Mhm.
indoctrinated, who are deeply devout in this woke religion thing? Have you
Mhm.
what has been successful for you?
I just
Yeah.
try my best to kind of, all right, this is like a perverse way of explaining it, but when like someone gets kidnapped and you know the politicians and everybody's gathering around making speeches about it and talking to the news and stuff, one thing that they do for very good reason is they look straight into the camera and they say the victim's name over and over again,
Mm,
right? And the reason for that is whoever the sociopath or psychopath it is that has kidnapped this person and intends to do something to them is going to have a much harder time dehumanizing them enough to be able to mete out that abuse if they're constantly reminded of that person's humanity, you know?
yeah,
Like if they're constantly reminded this is someone's daughter, this is someone's friend, this is someone's, you know, mother or whatever. This person has a name, this person has a life, this person has desires, this person feels pain. All those things get flooded in and it makes it so much harder to abuse somebody. So in that kind of vein, I do the same thing for myself and I kind of try to show the other person in the same way that that's who I am, right? So I constantly remind myself this is a person. This person believes what they believe for reasons. And the reasons aren't that they're stupid or evil. It's because they grew up a certain way, they experienced certain things, they learned certain things, and all that led up to who they are today and why they think what they think. And they are doing and believing what they feel is right,
yeah,
you know, even if they're wrong and even if I'm wrong and I'm doing the same thing. And there's that humility thing that we talked about at the beginning. I know I might be totally wrong here. So I need to listen to this person and I need to respect who they are as a human being. And I'm going to make that as explicit as possible. And what that does is it keeps me on track. It reminds me not to get angry, it reminds me to have patience and compassion. And hopefully, when it works, it also does the same for them. It shows, hey, this is a person. This person is listening to you. This person is being kind. This person is trying to understand. They're not just giving you, you know, applause lines. They're not just taking pot shots. They're really asking questions and sincerely looking for answers. And that has a tendency of disarming people. That has a tendency of kind of, oh, all right. Like I remember talking to a Trump supporter right before the election, and you know going back and forth and they're arguing about, you know, for example, like wokeness, like Trump is going to be a bulwark against wokeness and stuff, and I'm like that makes no sense, that's completely crazy, you know. And we're going back and forth, and then I noticed that they've kind of gone on autopilot in terms of responding in the way that they're used to responding
mm,
to the types of things that they're used to being told. And then I said, well, hold on, I didn't say that though. And they went, oh, but I thought you called me crazy. And I was like, no, I called the idea crazy, but you are a person and you deserve and get all the respect in the world from me as a human being. And I just said that out. I just explicitly wrote that. And they went, oh, and that shifted the conversation completely. And suddenly we were just going back and forth, disagreeing. But it wasn't this thing where they had their dukes up because
yeah,
they recognize, oh, this person's not attacking me. This person is actually listening. This person is respecting who I am. They're seeing me as a person. You know, say your name over and over again. That's
that's a
the
good,
approach. It's hard,
yeah.
but that's the idea there.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the saying, "See people the way that they wish to be seen,"
Mm-hmm.
or help or identify that. So like I understand that you are deeply committed to this country and you love this country and you sacrifice
Right.
a lot for this country and
Right.
you really want good things and you believe that you're doing the right thing. Like, because then they lower like, oh, okay, yeah, you see me like Candace Owens. You know, it's like
Mm-hmm.
Candace Owens, I understand that you are trying to bring new perspectives to the black community. You're trying to highlight perspectives that aren't generally given the mainstream view, and you know you're a smart person. Well,
Mm-hmm.
and she'd be like, yeah, I kind of am. Lowers her defenses a little bit to maybe
Mm-hmm.
be open-minded to what you're saying then.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot of like hostage negotiation type
Hmm.
tactics there. You have to connect with what they want. Why are they here? What are they doing? Why do they care so much about this? You have to
Yeah.
figure that out. If you don't already know, you ask to find out. And just in the act of asking, they will feel, oh, I'm being heard and I'm being understood. So even if you don't agree with them at the end of the day, they at least respect you because you respected them. And Daryl Davis is the ultimate example of this, converting literal Klansmen, like
Yeah.
grand dragons of the KKK, just through doing that, just through saying, hey,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to actually just listen to everything you have to say. And I'm going to treat you like a human being, whether you treat me that way or not. I'm going to treat you as a human being. And look what happens. Like a few years later, this dude is like officiating a
Yeah.
wedding, or like giving the bride away at a wedding of like a bunch of Klansmen. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
You can't argue with the results that he's gotten. That's the
No.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
like stopping hate through friendship and kindness, like it actually works. And
It's
it's right
amazing.
there.
Right.
Yeah. You just have
And
to be a badass like him to be able to do it.
well, that's the thing. That's what I was gonna say, is that anytime I bring up Daryl Davis, the first thing people say is like, dude, you can't expect me to like talk to KKK members, right? And I don't.
Yeah.
And you don't have to. And
Yeah.
luckily for you, there aren't that many of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's doing like the superhero level work. And
Yeah.
all you got to do is talk to your grandpa or your
Yeah. Who
uncle or
posted
your
something that was
sister.
like a little racist on
Yeah.
Facebook and now you don't talk
Right.
to him for 2 years.
Right. Who
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
they disagree with you about like this policy,
Yeah.
even if it's really intense, like abortion or something, but they're still your grandpa. They're still your uncle. You know what I mean? It's not all they are. Like a KKK member, like they've made their whole life this thing. And
Yeah.
it's even in that extreme scenario, it's still possible.
Yeah.
So for your Thanksgiving is coming. So you're like family member across the table at Thanksgiving that you can't stand because they're a conservative and you're a liberal, or vice versa. You could talk to them. If Daryl Davis can do that, you could talk to your Uncle John or whatever,
100%. Oh gosh, he's the best.
Yeah.
Like this, yeah, you have to have the balls to go into that situation. And that's rare, but yeah, I'm with you 100%. Like if he's the
Mhm.
extreme, then you can kind of just dial it back to
Right.
be,
Your
somewhat
order is
normal.
nowhere near as tall as his.
Yeah.
So you can absolutely handle dealing with a regular human being who just disagrees with you about something. That's important. It's important stuff. I don't mean to diminish the disagreement, but there's so much more to them than that disagreement. And you can use that as a way to, this is the Star Manning thing that I coined.
Yeah,
But
I
you
love it.
can use that as the ground upon which you disagree, so that it's not a fault line, so that it's common ground, so that it's a way of, let's remember that we're all kind of trying to get to the same place here. Like everyone just wants to be happy, everyone's trying to do what they feel is right, everyone's trying to make sure they're safe, secure, satisfied with their life, you know and there are different ways that people manifest those desires, but those are the desires. And if you can connect with how other people are interpreting those things, and like where their dials are in
Mhm.
terms of like trying to get there, you can connect with them, and then you might change your mind. They might change your mind. You might change their mind. It just goes on and on and on. You
Yeah,
know
and then you'll be just shoulder to shoulder moving toward a similar goal, and then that's where unity
exactly.
comes in, and we just need a lot of that.
Yeah, man.
Angel, so where can we? Your podcast is awesome. How fun is that? You get to talk to some awesome people, huh? It's really
Yeah,
cool. You like just
it's
sitting down with these
always
like top brains of the world.
yeah. I mean, we're lucky because we have all these cool advisors that are
Yeah.
kind of just they have to come on, kind of. um,
Are you learning a
it's
lot though? Like I find
yeah,
I learn
it's
just from talking to
fascinating.
everybody, but like
Mhm.
to be able these high performers that you guys get on the show.
Yeah,
Have you been just learning a lot?
it's fascinating and super nerve wracking because it's like, oh man, Steven Pinker. Like, I got to make sure, I got to make sure I'm good with Steven Pinker. Like, I don't want him
Yeah.
to think I'm an idiot, and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. All that anxiety and all that
Mm.
stuff where like I'm setting up and I'm like, man, I would love to just get hit by a bus right now and not do this because but it's
Yeah.
totally irrational because I also at the same time I'm feeling that I'm thinking this is going to be great and I'm going to have a
Yeah.
good time. So
And
it's
it
just weird.
and it always is. I mean, at the
Yeah.
end.
It's always like that. Yeah. But no, it's great, man. Yeah. And what was I going to say? Fairperspectives.org. You can find the
Yeah.
podcast. We're on YouTube and everywhere else you get podcasts. Fairforall.org is Fair's website. You can find
Yeah.
all that stuff there. And as for myself, angeleduardo.com. You can find all my work there, all my writing and music and podcasts and things. And yeah, and I'm on Twitter a lot. Probably
Okay.
too much.
Probably too much. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this, man. This is a great conversation, as I knew it would be. And I appreciate you coming on here and giving me an hour of your time. And
Yeah,
we're just gonna keep kind of doing our thing, and I'm sure we'll intersect as we have very similar directions that we're trying to go in with this whole culture war thing. I
for sure,
appreciate you. I
man.
appreciate everything
Yeah.
you're doing.
I appreciate you too, man. Thank you for what
Oh,
you're doing. I really mean that. Uh, we need more people doing this sort of stuff.
yeah.
So I'm glad it's not just me. I'm glad it's not just you,
Right.
you
Well,
know?
let's grow
And
this thing. Yeah.
yeah, man, let's keep going. And anytime, happy to talk to you. It's awesome.
Okay. All right. Thanks.